Today, we have robot vacuums, endless cleaning products, and more organizing tools than ever before. And yet, many of us still feel like keeping a house clean is exhausting. So what were they doing differently? It turns out there were some surprisingly simple habits that kept homes running smoothly even back then. And no, I'm not saying you need to give up on your self-cleaning oven or even your robot vacuum or any other conveniences. Which will I love and which will I hate? Let's explore and play a little bit and see if we can't get back to basics, make life easier, and maybe even cleaning a little bit better. Today, cleaning aisles look like a chemistry lab, but older homes cleaned with just a few simple ingredients like baking soda, which is actually amazing for scrubbing things. It's actually quite gentle on a lot of things. I like to use it for my sink, which is really great. But then there's the OG herself, and that is vinegar. Vinegar was actually widely available long before commercial cleaners, like long before. I'm gonna get to that. It was a common household cleaner for centuries, used for glass, for counters, for deep cleaning. Now it's not good for everything, so stand by. Before commercial glass cleaners existed, many people cleaned windows using vinegar instead. So have you seen the combo of vinegar plus water plus a newspaper? Yes, a newspaper. The ink in old newspapers, it actually helped prevent streaks. And that's one I gotta try, because I actually haven't tried that. Now, before I go on, I wonder where the heck we even got vinegar from. And I know that you can make, that wine can turn into vinegar, but where did light vinegar come from? That's really bugging my tennis elbow. It's actually made from fermented grains, and it was discovered between 5,000 to 7,000 years ago. Probably a happy accident. The thing about vinegar, it is cheap. It is mildly acidic, and it's actually antibacterial in a lot of circumstances. It's also really good at dissolving mineral buildup and grease and removing mineral deposits from things. I like to use it in my on-demand kettle, which I love so much. I will go ahead, add some vinegar, run it through, boil it again, rinse it, and it just like gets rid of that, which is so good. It's also really good at deodorizing your drains and your sinks. You can put some of our friend baking soda in the drain, and then you can add a little bit of vinegar and some hot water, and it cleans your sink so nicely. I actually think I should do that. My drain could use that. It's also good for cleaning cutting boards. And right now, I am trying to get sort of a funk out of my clothes right now. They need like a bit of a laundry stripping. So what I'm doing is rinsing everything with vinegar right now. It does such a good job of freshening the laundry. It's cheap, it's accessible, and it's effective. Plus, you can combine it with soap or baking soda, especially if you want to make a volcano, which is really fun. So here is how you can use it. Now, if you want to make a great window and glass cleaning recipe, you can put 1 part vinegar with 1 part water, but you are going to want to avoid using it on natural things like stone or marble, granite, travertine. You don't want to put it on your cast iron cookware. It's going to take the finish right off of that. Hardware floors with certain finishes, you need to be very careful. Waxed furniture, and do not use it on your electronics. There's probably a lot of stuff you don't want to use it on. I actually really like vinegar in a lot of ways. It's safer in so many ways than some of the harsher, newer cleaners, but you still do need to be careful about inhaling. So if you're like cleaning something and you've decided to heat it up, don't breathe it in. Be very careful and don't let it sit on your skin for too long. You might even want to use gloves a lot of the time. And the ER nurse in me wants to remind you that if you get it in your eye, you're going to want to flush your eye for a good 10 to 15 minutes. And you might even want to seek medical attention, depending on how much you got in your eye and how long it was there. But somewhere along the way, we decided we needed 17 cleaners for 17 different surfaces. Meanwhile, vinegar was just sitting there quietly in the corner like, I could have done all of that. And when you're done cleaning, there's no waste. All you need to do is just go ahead and add some of this to your salad. Yummy. Question: when was the last time that you washed your walls? Exactly. Washing walls was something that was common in Victorian housekeeping manuals because they used, after they started using wood, after, wood was used forever, they started using coal, and that caused a lot of soot on everything in the house, and it would build up, especially like around the walls of the fireplace, but also around where they cooked. So cooking smoke would stain the walls. So homes were actually washed top to bottom seasonally, and spring cleaning often included wall and ceiling cleaning. So they would use long-handled brushes and they would use soap mixtures as well. And one of the things they would do is they would dust, and back in like the Tudor period, they would use like the wing of a goose or something and use it to like brush and clean and get like schmutz off. The other thing is wallpaper and paint would trap smoke residue. So back then they got dirty from coal smoke, but today our walls get dirty from smoothie disasters, which I learned the hard way when my kids were little. And if that smoothie had blueberries in it, I mean, good luck getting that off of your walls. Now, when I first ever heard about cleaning walls was way back in Calgary, Alberta in like 1998, when I had a boyfriend whose mom or stepmom asked his sister to clean the walls. She wasn't into it, and so I offered to. I had never even heard of this as a thing, and I used a mop to clean the walls. But now I like to use good old-fashioned vinegar a little bit, especially very diluted, or some soap, and I will actually spot clean my walls. So for this video, I was like, you know what, I'm really glad for this opportunity. So I take my little Swiffer and I go around the corners and get the cobwebs out or whatever. And I also will spot clean certain areas. So there are spots that just get really, really gross. Near the toilet, especially if you have men in your house, it just seems to be a thing. Also anywhere near, of course, the fireplace. Door light switches can be huge for that. But for the most part, I like to spot clean. But I think, honestly, I don't think every wall in the house needs to be cleaned, especially now with different methods. But probably the kitchen, most surfaces should be wiped down, especially with something like degreaser. I really like the Dawn, but that like the power wash. But I think that the vinegar method might even be better. But the rest of the house, I like to use my modified Swiffer. Today, we tend to clean our floors when they start looking bad. But for most of history, people swept their floors every single day. Sweeping was quick and it was expected daily. You kind of had to do it. Kitchens, entryways, and dining spaces were swept the most, obviously, because that's where the most dirt was tracked in. Farmhouses were often swept twice a day, probably after breakfast and maybe after dinner. And dirt would come from shoes and from animals. Did you know that they actually had to have their animals in at night, especially in like, I think the Tudor period and stuff? Like if you did not have a barn, that cow was coming in your place. So there were also things like wood ash and coal soot, probably like animal dung, very gross. So people would prevent the buildup instead of waiting for a deep cleaning. It was like a real sort of maintenance thing they had going on. And a little bit more historical context is that carpet was very rare for centuries, obviously. Rugs would be something that they had, but those would be taken outside and beaten. And then the floors were usually wood or stone. And I think sometimes the finish wouldn't be great. A lot of places would even have like an actual dirt floor. But if not, what they would put on top of that is like rushes. So if they couldn't sweep, then they would trade out the rushes every now and then. And you might be like, okay, so brooms, what were they made of? Well, they were made of straw, corn husk, and twigs, which you can imagine would actually be kind of good at getting like real stuff out of, especially if you had like a stone floor. Because sweeping was faster than letting dirt accumulate. That's why they did it. So one of the things that I do in my house is I don't necessarily sweep all of the time, but people would sweep more often because they could see the dirt. In my house, I wear sandals a lot because I am like so tactily sensitive and I don't want to step on crumbs or, God forbid, anything sticky. When my kids were little, they made more messes, of course, but also like if there was a crawling baby, you had to clean the floor so much more. But I do find that I used to vacuum a little bit less, but then I started visiting my brother and my sister-in-law a lot more, and I realized she would vacuum her floor like twice a day. And I know a lot of people, our cleaning strategy is ignore it, ignore it, ignore it, and then vacuum aggressively once a week. But instead, I've started doing what my lovely sister-in-law does, is I will vacuum the floor usually about once a day, and it is so much better. And it keeps things, and at the very least, it keeps me being like, oh, do I need to wash the floor? So I'm curious, are you a broom person or a vacuum person? And speaking of floors, modern mops, they make cleaning floors fairly easy, and I think they are a fantastic option that we have. But historically, it was more of a workout. So that brings us to scrubbing floors by hand. So floors used to be scrubbed with brushes and cloths. And I know that they would often, if they had a stone floor and it was like by squares, they would scrub each square by, like, rinse it and then dry it, each square individually. Like, I mean, tons of people had different ways of doing it. My grandparents actually lived in Indonesia for a little while, and they would pour water on the whole floor, and then they would drag a cloth across it to clean the floor. So historically, there were a lot of different ways, like a scrub brush or cloths, like I mentioned, and it would be done on your hands and your knees. And my mother-in-law, before she had my husband and his sister, they were twins, that day, that woman scrubbed that floor. It was a stone floor, and she did it on her hands, which I think is really cool. But it was also a common weekly task, but in some cases, it was daily. Now, early mops, they did not become common until the late 1800s, and they would, of course, like have their bucket of water, and they would add soap flakes, and that's how they would clean. But wooden floors started requiring more and more maintenance, and it would, perhaps houses got bigger, and that was why they were like, okay, I need another option here, and that's where they came up with mops. So I, again, decided I was gonna dive in and do some hand washing, because I had done it recently when I did my Amish cleaning video, but I was like, I am doing this experiment for my lovelies, for my ladies, and I am taking one for the team, doing the Lord's work, and I have to admit, I actually really love it. I mean, this house has hardwood almost everywhere, so I am not washing the entire house on my hands and knees, because that would be impossible, or not impossible, but it would take so much time. But what I really like the idea is to do the kitchen, especially because the kitchen does end up with more sort of spots that need a little bit more elbow grease, and I think you can do a much better job. So since us over 40 gals might be a bit stiff, there is no harm in using a mop, like obviously, and like I said, for the rest of the house, the mop is going to be used. But sometimes you just want to get down there and get things like so super spick and span. But the other thing is, I found it does actually help with your flexibility. So this was basically leg day and cleaning day combined, which is pretty good use of my time. So tell me, do you mop or do you hand wash? Okay, so for this next one, I don't want my mom to be mad, but my grandma would probably shake her head that I didn't really know about this, but you should air out your house. So for centuries, people did not use air purifiers. They did this instead. The morning air out. They would open up all of the windows and sometimes the doors of their house. Now, I have been talking about this a lot lately, because it's just something that I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is life changing. So what they would do back in the day is they would fold back all of their bedding, air out their mattresses, which I still do. I think it's an absolutely lovely thing to do before making the bed, and just open up all the windows, walk around the house, open up all the windows. You can open the doors. I have to take my cats, I have one right here, and either lock them up, or if I open this one window right behind you, they are going to be like, oh, they don't realize the door is open, and they're like, oh my gosh, it smells so amazing. But what's so nice is that it is removing the stale air from our sleeping rooms. So bedrooms, you know what it's like to go into a bedroom that is really musty. Oh my gosh. But in the olden days, they believed that it would prevent illness, and that damp air caused mildew and illness concerns. But the thing is, it doesn't necessarily, but the bedrooms definitely became humid overnight, and a lot of European cultures still practice this today, and a lot of people are commenting and they're like, how do you not know this? And I was like, I don't know. So when I do it, I just leave it open for 5 to 10 minutes. But here's what it actually does for you and your house. It may not necessarily prevent illness. It probably helps for people who have asthma, as long as there's no allergens coming in through the windows, but it reduces indoor humidity. So overnight, our bedrooms, they accumulate moisture from our breathing, from sweat, from body heat, and opening the windows, it helps remove that moisture and just cycles that air out. It can reduce mildew and mold growth and musty smells, especially in places like bathrooms, which is mwah. It also improves air quality. Indoor air can contain far more carbon dioxide than outside, obviously, and dust. And then VOCs, the volatile organic compounds from furniture and products. So if you've ever painted and been like, oh my gosh, like these smells are getting to me, it's from that. And you're gonna wanna air out your house. And also from even stale odor. Sometimes when you're cooking, especially if it's like meat on a high heat, it's so nice to air out your house. And fresh air dilutes that. It also helps remove allergens if you are allergic to dust or pets. I am allergic to all 4 of my cats, but I love them and I think that they are lengthening my life because they're here. So I'm willing to take a daily allergy medicine. But also any other indoor pollutants, as we talked about. Plus, it can improve your sleep environment. Fresh air often, it cools the room and it lowers the CO2 levels, that carbon dioxide that we're breathing out. It helps freshen that and it improves comfort. Some studies show that lower CO2 levels help sleep quality, which, I mean, who over 40 can't use better sleep? Am I right? I like to sleep in a room that is 16 degrees Celsius, if at all possible, depending on the season, which is like a 60-degree Fahrenheit room. My husband, he thinks opening a window for 10 minutes is basically attempted larceny if I do it in the winter for our electric bill, but he is not the neck of the family. If you know what that reference is, let me know below. One thing though, opening windows, it's not always helpful if outdoor air pollution is high. So if pollen counts are extreme, like I mentioned, or if the humidity outdoor is very high. So during the summer, I live on Vancouver Island in British Columbia, and there are a lot of forest fires most years. And I know a lot of people in North America are experiencing this. There's things that are as the result of that, but we are ending up having to keep our windows closed because I do not like the smoky smell that comes in, but I also hate keeping my windows closed, but I don't want to like make the indoor air quality bad. But let me know, are you team sleeps with the window open or closed? Moving on, today we discover expire food when it is very expired quite often. So back in the day, pantries were checked regularly. Food spoilage was a real risk and people wasted a lot less food back then. Also, there was limited storage, which meant that there was constant awareness of your food supply. Plus, households rotated food frequently. Now, food preservation, it used to matter so much for winter survival. I mean, it still does, but our preservation methods have changed a lot. So root cellars and pantries required management. They had to know what was in there and they had to make sure they were cycling things. Waste was minimized. So in our house, we are not like, we're getting much better at not wasting food. I think wasting food is just like a tragedy and we should all try to avoid doing it, but it is something that unfortunately happens a lot. And a few years ago, I really started getting into my pantry, especially because I do like all of this decluttering stuff. But once I found a spice in my cupboard that expired during a different political party being prime minister. And if you know Canadian politics, you'd be like, whoa, that was a really long time ago. So I actually got the idea of doing a pantry inventory from my friend Jessica from Three Rivers Homestead, and she keeps a very detailed inventory. And when I was researching this video, I saw it again. And so people back then, that's what they would do. And I absolutely love this system. So I make sure that I go in my basement and I keep an inventory of what I have in my pantry down there and in here and in the freezers outside. And it is so handy, especially when I'm at Costco. I mean, I often still will call my husband and be like, do we have this or that, or do you need this or that? But it is so good for knowing that I already have chocolate chips. I don't need to buy more. I already have, oats. I don't need to buy more. Or, oh, I don't have oats. I need to buy more, whichever. I also have a list, but it's also really helpful for meal planning and to avoid wasted food. So I will definitely say food pantry inventory is for me, and I'm curious if you have a food inventory. Today, when dishcloths get questionable, we just throw them in the laundry with some bleach. But that bleach smell, it stays, which I think is kind of dubious. What does that mean? Does that mean there's still some of that chlorine in there? And also living with a septic tank, we need to be very careful with what we put in, and bleach is a no-go. So enter boiling dishcloths. And I thought that was so smart, because dishcloths used to be boiled to sanitize them, and you just don't really hear about that anymore. And I know my grandma, again, I keep talking about her. I love my grandma so much, and she's still with us. She's turning 92, but she would boil, I think she said, like baby diapers back in the day. And so it makes sense that that's what we would do, because hot water would kill the bacteria and the odors. And that would be part of the laundry or the kitchen sanitation routine. And historically, sanitation awareness, it started to grow in the 1800s. Like before that, people were really into miasma theories, meaning they thought that if something had a smell, then that meant it was going to make you sick, which isn't 100% wrong, but they just didn't understand why. They thought it was the actual odor that made you sick. But boiling was the simplest sterilization method, and it still probably is one of the simplest methods that we have at our disposal right now. So here's why boiling actually works. It kills most bacteria and microorganisms. It breaks down grease trapped in the fiber, and it also helps release odor-causing compounds, which is really, really handy. Now, older kitchens, they usually had multiple cloths on rotation and not just one. And one of the things I love in my house is to use a dishcloth. I basically change it out at least once a day. And if it even comes close to touching the floor or anything gross or whatever, usually, if you ever see, sometimes I forget to take it out, but sometimes I'll have it drying here or there. And then I go and put it in the laundry, because if it gets like all crumpled up, then it definitely will get smelly, definitely need to be boiled or washed with bleach, which I can't do. So back then they would have one for dishes, one for wiping surfaces, and one for drying hands. We do have one for drying hands. And in my house, I'm like trying to explain to these people, the towel, the dish towel, the hand towel, whatever, is for clean things. We don't wipe our dirty hands on it, but that's the life when you live with 4 men. Anyway, drying was actually a bigger hygiene factor though, and this is something people often miss. It makes me think of Angela's Ashes. If you ever read that book, it was like, they were like, we had this towel and it never dried. So can you imagine how that would smell? But damp cloths would grow bacteria quickly. And historically, they would hang cloths on hooks so that they would dry, or they would dry them near stoves. When I use my fireplace, or we use our fireplace in the winter, I love to dry stuff by it because it dries so fast. Sometimes I'll even like go and like put my hair near it, actually once I singed it. Anyway, so they would rotate their drying cloths daily. So when I tried it, I put it on my stove and I thought, this is actually a really good idea. And I think I would do it more for things where it had like a stubborn sort of smell, unfortunately. But then I wrung it out, but it was very hot. Of course, used tongs, but still wrung it out when it was kind of hot still. So I used one of my dish gloves, and they dried so fast because the steam, like they didn't even drip. Meanwhile, if they had been cold, they would dry less fast. Anyway, the real enemy isn't the cloth, it's actually the dampness. So if a dishcloth could talk, we'd probably throw it away immediately. And if it could talk, maybe it would walk. And if it would walk, it could probably run away right out of a messy kitchen if it got that smelly. So again, the traditional method is you take a pot of water, you're going to bring it to a boil, and you maybe would want to add washing soda or soap flakes, but in my case, because I'm going to use my washing machine, I would probably wash it first and then do that. I think that's what I would do. But then you're gonna wanna simmer for 5 to 10 minutes. And then back then they would dry things by the sunlight or in the stove. And like I said, go ahead, use tongs. Remember, I'm a former emergency nurse. We would see burns, we would see scalds, so you definitely want to be careful of little ones. So today, we will often buy sprays to make things smell fresh, like as if it removes the smell. No, you're just covering it up. But historically, they used this absolutely magical, mystical ball that was called the sun, which is not always around for those of us in the Pacific Northwest of North America, and it's certainly not around today, but that's okay. So sunlight cleaning was really handy. They would use bedding, they would hang it outside, rugs would be aired in sunlight, and the sunlight would help remove the odors and of course the moisture. And UV light, it actually kills bacteria, which is so lovely. And we talked about like airing out the house earlier. The fresh air is really nice for your stuff, but that actual UV light is actually doing something. And this was a really common practice for things like mattresses and blankets. Dairy maids would take their tools and go ahead and prop them out in the sun. And I like to go ahead and put old smelly shoes out in the sun because the closet gets kind of smelly. So I think that's really good. But my grandma, she would do laundry and she would put things out in the sun and the fresh air, plus combined with whatever. It was just like absolutely love it. And there's just something so amazing about the smell. And I know it's not just like, even if you didn't have a grandma who did that, you try it. I'm gonna tell you, you're absolutely gonna love it. It's gonna make you feel like you have your life together. And this is the thing to do. I want to do more of is have my life together. So one thing a lot of people in my Mighty Circle membership tell me is that they have things on their kitchen and their dining room tables piled high. And a lot of people, they can't even use their tables. They've slowly become storage areas. But older households, they had to keep their tables clear when they were not actively being used. Tables were not storage surfaces, they were work surfaces. So when one activity ended, the table would be cleared so it was used for the next task. And this was necessary because homes 100 to 200 years ago, they had fewer rooms, well, probably even less than that, but fewer surfaces and fewer storage areas. A lot of them didn't even have a lot of seating, right? So it wasn't like they were like, oh, we'll just go and eat in the living room like a lot of us do now. A single table might be used for things like preparing food, eating meals, sewing, homework, writing, sorting vegetables, household projects. For me, I love to come to this table and do a little bit of work or whatever. I love it. And because the same table served many purposes, it had to be reset constantly. And dining tables had to be cleaned after every meal. Tables were needed for many of those tasks. So for me, we keep this table pretty clear, which I love, but my dining table is the naughty one and it occasionally reappears under paperwork. So that is one that we need to work on. And I mean, in this day and age of Amazon, although I'm getting really good at just doing like one Amazon order a month, but making sure it's like flat surfaces are just begging for people to put things on. And I'm not the only one, but anyway, resetting tables. I think that's a good one. It's just something I need to work on. The next one is actually a big pet peeve, and it's sort of like more of a societal thing that's happening, and a lot of it has to do with how things are made. But today, when something breaks, quite often we're like, I'm just gonna replace it. But back then, they would repair it before they replace it. So clothing would be mended regularly, tools were repaired instead of replaced, because thrift and resourcefulness, back then, they were normal. It seems like a lot of people these days are like, no, I'm just gonna buy a new one. Clothing was expensive though, and sewing skills were common. There was a bit more of a repair culture, and I also think there was more of a sort of like community neighborly culture, which is something I'm so passionate about. That's why I started our membership, because I'm just like, we need community. But anyway, you could say, oh, my blank is broken. I'm gonna go ask Ted down the road if he has a thingy that I can go and fix it with, which was great. This very microwave, this handle broke off. And I was like, husband, this broke off. And that man fixed it, which I am very impressed by, because we honestly used to darn socks, and today we just throw them away if they emotionally disappoint us. And we actually did have a similar microwave before, and it broke. And we replaced it because we were like, how are we gonna do it? But I think one of the best things we can do now is to buy a higher quality, which is what we did with this one. And that way, hopefully it lasts longer, and then try to fix what we can. And there are a ton of tutorials on YouTube and Google to help you out. Or even if you're just like, hey, maybe if I just use a washer, then I can like have something for the screw to grab onto or whatever. I do like to repair things, and I actually do sometimes like repair socks or whatever if I can. And again, like fixing an appliance, that could save you so much money. This like little washer was probably like 10 cents, and we ended up saving probably like $300. So one of the biggest challenges we have now in this day and age, especially for us 40 plus ladies, is balancing everything and not knowing what comes next. So instead of doing random chores all week, older households, they would follow a rhythm. So here's an example. On Monday, they would do laundry. Now, I have talked about how much I love Ruth Goodman from Victorian Farm, and she showed like a whole washing crazy cycle that she went through. And it was like getting up at like 2 or 3 in the morning to do the laundry and the washing and everything. And then you'd like wring it out. It was like all day. I mean, and so even back in like the 50s or the 80s or whatever, people, they would have a day where they did it. Monday laundry, Tuesday ironing, Wednesday mending, Thursday baking, Friday shopping, or pantry day. Large tasks often required full days, and laundry was not as simple as it is now. Thank God. Tell you, you would have to take my washing machine out of my cold dead hands before you would ever get out of my sight. Routines simplified household management. And honestly, I feel like my modern cleaning schedule was just panic clean when somebody was coming over. But a lot of routines like Fly Lady and others, they rely on this routine. And I also love my friend Ariel's routine, and I will link my video reviewing her routine because I think it's really good at the end of this video. One of the good things for me as far as the routines go is that I don't iron, so I can free up my Tuesday for something else. One habit that kept older homes running smoothly was something really simple, and that was just an evening kitchen reset. Back in the day, I had a boyfriend. It was the same one who had like wall washing one, but his mother and grandmother were like, if you even go in the kitchen after we've cleaned it at the end of the day, like it's curtains for you. But anyway, people would do an evening kitchen reset. So dishes would be washed before bed, counters wiped, crumbs swept, as I mentioned, the kitchen reset for the morning. Kitchens were central workspaces. Houses were smaller. And starting the day clean really, really mattered. And there was just something so magical about walking in to a kitchen that is clean. And just unfortunately, it does require cleaning the other night. But just the other day, I woke up to a bit of a messy kitchen because my child decided he was going to make Kraft dinner before bed, which I think is that called KD in the States? Anyway, should I kick him out or should I just feed him that salad that I made at the beginning of this video? I'm just kidding, but I was sad because my kitchen was not as clean as I wanted to. I want to walk into a clean kitchen. I'm just going to say that. Tell me how you feel about waking up to a clean kitchen or versus a messy kitchen. I mean, it happens sometimes. And something I noticed while researching all of these household habits is that many of them revolve around one place, and that is the kitchen, because we have food storage, pantry management, kitchen rhythms. And honestly, the kitchen, it is just still the control center of the house, certainly my house and probably yours. And when the kitchen is chaotic, the whole house tends to feel chaotic. So if you want to see the simple system I use to keep my kitchen and pantry under control, watch this video right here. I hope something great happens for you today. Please like and subscribe. Like 60% of people are not subscribed, but they're watching. Stay tidy and mighty. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.